You killed my sister. You know you did it. Ain't nobody got to lie on you. You killed my sister. Look at you just sitting right there looking guilty as because he
I'm letting
guilty,
you
y'all.
talk. You can
Look
have the
at his
flow.
face.
You
Look
can have
at
the
his face,
flow.
y'all. Look how guilty he is.
Evening to you both. Family members and friends say they are frustrated because there has been no arrest, and they say they know exactly who did the shooting. And even more upsetting, they claim the shooter has been on social media many days since the murder.
And I just feel like I just want justice for her.
Justice that Raesha Heard's best friends say is coming too slowly. The young mother of two boys, who's described as the life of the party, was gunned down, Decatur police say, in her parents' driveway. Family members say Raesha was getting groceries out of the trunk when someone ambushed her from the side of the family's home on Kelly Chapel Road. They shot her multiple times. Her youngest son, just 8 years old, watched it all.
Words couldn't explain how bad it hurt for them to have witness that is unexplainable. It's so hard.
Raesha Heard was 31 years old, and the people who knew her tend to describe her the same way before they describe anything else. She was the one who lifted the room, a mother of two boys, the kind of woman who showed up for everyone, who remembered the small things, who could turn a bad afternoon into something bearable just by walking in. Her family called her the glue, not as a compliment you say at a funeral, but as a fact about how the household actually worked. When things fell apart, she was the one who held the pieces. That detail matters more than it seems right now, and we'll come back to it, because the family was already carrying a wound when Raesha was still alive, and she was the one helping them survive it. For a while, the relationship didn't look like a warning. That's the part people struggle with later. When Raesha first became involved with Justin Rene Lewis, there was no obvious alarm bell, no single moment anyone can point to and say, that was when we should have known. Lewis wasn't a stranger from nowhere. He was a New Orleans rapper who performed under the name Mad Muzik Cali, a man who had spent years chasing a specific kind of fame, the viral kind, the kind built on cornering well-known artists in public and freestyling at them until a camera caught it. He'd reportedly even rapped in front of major names in the industry, the sort of clip that gets passed around and makes a person feel, for a moment, like they're standing at the edge of something big. He had followers. He had a story he liked to tell about himself, about coming up with nothing and clawing his way toward a dream. To someone on the outside, he could be charming, he could be persuasive. He knew how to be seen. But here's a question worth sitting with before we go any further. How do you spot the danger in a person who has built their entire identity around being likable on camera? Because behind the public version of Justin Lewis, the family says, was a private version that almost no one was allowed to see clearly. And the people who did see it had already been trying to sound the alarm for years. To understand how frightened Raesha's family really was, you have to understand that this was not the first time someone close to Justin Lewis ended up at the center of a tragedy. Years before Raesha, there was another woman. Her name was Sidni Dalcour, and the way her story rhymes with Raesha's is the part that still keeps people up at night. Sidni was 25. Friends and family called her China Doll. She had lived in the Dallas area before relocating to New Orleans, where she took a job at a restaurant in the French Quarter and tried to build a life in a city she loved. She was, by every account from the people who knew her, warm and funny and impossible not to like the personality that fills a doorway. And for roughly 5 years, according to her own family, she was married to Justin Lewis. Her relatives have since said publicly that those years were not what they appeared to be from the outside. Sidni's sister, Tracy, has described a marriage marked by serious abuse injuries, hospital visits, the kind of harm a family doesn't forget. Sidni's cousin, Mariah Dyer, has said the family begged her to leave, again and again, and that Sidni stayed because she believed, the way so many people in that situation believe, that he would change. That if she loved him enough, or waited long enough, the man she fell for would come back. He never did. On the 18th of May 2017, Sidni was sitting in her car, a red Infiniti parked outside a New Orleans apartment complex on Bundy Road where her cousin lived. It was a Thursday, an ordinary visit in an ordinary part of her week. Neighbors later told police they'd heard a burst of gunshots cut through the complex. When officers reached the vehicle, Sidni was still in the driver's seat, the engine running, the car idling as though she'd only just arrived or had been about to leave. She had been shot. She did not survive. She was 25 years old, and she had her whole life in front of her, a job she'd built in a new city, a fresh start she'd reached for, a personality her friends still talk about in the present tense, because it's too painful to do otherwise. Notice the shape of that scene and file it away. A young woman, a car, the engine still on, gunfire that came and went before anyone could stop it. Because 6 years later, in a different state, the details would line up with a symmetry that no one who knew both women could ignore. Her family says they knew, instantly and without hesitation, who they believed was responsible. But knowing something and proving it are two different worlds. Justin Lewis was suspected. He was talked about. He was, in the minds of Sidni's loved ones, the obvious answer. And yet he was never charged. The case went cold. To this day, by the public record, no one has been held accountable for Sidni Dalcour's death, and her family has spent years living with a grief that was never given an ending. Hold on to that, because it changes how you hear everything that comes next. When Raesha Heard's family looked at Justin Lewis, they weren't only seeing their daughter's troubled relationship. Some of them were aware of a history. They were watching a pattern they were terrified to see repeat. And the most chilling detail of all is how closely it eventually would. So now return to Raesha and watch the relationship the way her family watched it, not from the outside, where it looked like a couple with the usual ups and downs, but from up close, where the small things stopped looking small. The family has been blunt about this part. They say Justin mistreated Raesha for years. Not in a single explosive event, but in the grinding, repetitive way that abuse usually works, the kind that wears a person down so gradually that even she can lose track of how much she's absorbing. Her sister, Raesha Heard Dickens, later put it plainly to reporters. This was a man who had hurt Raesha for a long time, and the family had watched it happen, helpless, the way families so often are. And watch how that kind of harm operates, because it's rarely just about the violence itself. It's about distance. Relatives of women in Raesha's position describe the same slow drift again and again. The phone calls that get shorter, the visits that stop happening, the holidays where she's somehow always unavailable. The people who love her notice the gaps before they understand what's filling them. By the time anyone says it out loud, the person they're worried about has been quietly pulled toward the edge of her own family's life, until reaching her takes effort that didn't used to be necessary. That drift is not an accident. It's the point. The fewer people standing close to a victim, the fewer people there are to catch the warning signs, and the easier it becomes to convince her that the danger she feels is something she's imagining. Raesha's family didn't imagine it. They lived alongside it for years, and the fear they describe wasn't vague. It was specific, and it was earned. Think about what that actually means day to day. It means there were good moments, because there always are. That's what makes it so hard to leave. It means there were apologies and promises and stretches where everything seemed fine enough to doubt your own memory of the bad nights. And it means that somewhere in that cycle, Raesha started doing the math that abuse forces a person to do, weighing her safety against her fear, weighing leaving against the consequences of leaving. Because the people who study these relationships will tell you something that sounds backwards until you understand it. The most dangerous moment in an abusive relationship is often not while it's happening. It's the moment the person tries to walk away. And Raesha was trying to walk away. She had reached the point where staying was no longer survivable, emotionally or otherwise, and she made the decision her family had been praying she would make. She ended it. She tried to close the door. By every sign, she was doing exactly what everyone tells victims to do: get out, get distance, get safe. But there was a complication that the door couldn't close on. Raesha was pregnant. And according to a police report later obtained and reported by the Shade Room, this is where the story turns from a frightening breakup into something far darker. The report indicates that the man identified as the father wanted the pregnancy terminated. Raesha did not. She had made up her mind. For her, this wasn't a negotiation. For him, if the family's account and the investigation's framing are accurate, it was apparently intolerable. Lewis himself, in his own public comments, would later muddy the water by claiming there was only a possibility the child was his, a statement that reads very differently depending on what you already know about the man saying it. And here is the detail that should have changed everything. According to that same police report, the father figure in this story didn't wait for the night in the driveway to make his intentions known. Months earlier, the report states, he had already fired at Raesha's car. She survived that earlier attempt for one reason and one reason only. The magazine reportedly came loose from the weapon. A jam. A malfunction. A few millimeters of metal between Raesha Heard and a different date on a headstone. Sit with how much that single fact reframes everything. This was not a crime that came out of nowhere. By the account in the investigative file, there had already been one attempt on her life, an attempt that failed by sheer mechanical luck. The danger wasn't a possibility anymore. It was a rehearsal. So why was she still unprotected? Why was a man who had allegedly already tried once still close enough to try again? These are the questions that haunt every case like this, and they rarely have a clean answer. The honest reality is that the systems meant to protect women in Raesha's position move slowly, and predators move fast. And the gap between those two speeds is exactly where tragedies live. Her family was frightened. They were watching. They were aware. And still, the distance Raesha had tried so hard to create was not enough. Now think about the contradiction at the heart of this man. On one hand, here was someone who, behind closed doors, the families of two different women describe in nearly identical terms: controlling, dangerous, abusive. On the other hand, here was a public performer who spent his days smiling into cameras and chasing internet fame. That split the private menace and the public showman isn't a side detail. It's the entire engine of how he kept getting away with it. People who only saw the camera version found it almost impossible to believe the other version existed. And that disbelief was its own kind of protection for him. By the autumn of 2023, Raesha had done everything within her power. She had left. She had drawn her line about the pregnancy. She was back at her parents' home, surrounded by family, in the place that should have been her sanctuary. Her young son was with her. Her family was inside, just steps away, close enough to hear. That closeness is the cruelest part of what happened next, and it's also the reason this story refuses to fade. On the 11th of October, 2023, Raesha came home with groceries. She pulled into the driveway on Kelly Chapel Road, the same driveway, the same ordinary act, the same small domestic routine that anyone reading this has done 100 times without a second thought. She went to the trunk. Her son was right there with her. And in front of that little boy, the violence the family had feared for years finally arrived. I'm not going to walk you through the details of it, because Raesha deserves better than to be reduced to the worst seconds of her life, and because her loved ones are still here, still grieving, and may one day read words like these. What matters is this: Raesha Heard was shot multiple times in her parents' driveway, and she did not survive. The pregnancy she had refused to end ended with her. And the last thing her son saw of his mother happened in the place that was supposed to be the safest place he knew. The family was inside the house. They heard it. They came out into it. There is no version of this that is not unbearable, and there is no sentence I can write that makes it less so. In an instant, a household that was already wounded was shattered all over again. Because remember what I asked you to hold on to earlier. Raesha was the glue. And the reason that word carries so much weight is that her family had already lost someone barely a year before. They had buried a 15-year-old relative, Romello, who was himself shot and killed. Raesha had been the one helping the family carry that loss. She had been their rock through the worst thing they'd ever faced, right up until she became the worst thing they'd ever faced. 2 devastating losses in the span of roughly 14 months. The person who held them together through the first one was taken in the second. How does a family even begin to absorb that? In the immediate aftermath, The man the family believed was responsible was gone. Justin Lewis had fled the scene. And what he did next is, for many people, the part of this story that's hardest to comprehend, harder, almost, than the crime itself. He didn't hide. He didn't disappear into silence. He went online. While police were actively searching for him, while Raesha's family was drowning in fresh grief, Justin Lewis was reportedly active on social media posting, going live, carrying himself as though the world hadn't just been torn apart. His accounts, which already had a substantial following, became a gathering place for thousands of people demanding his arrest. And rather than retreat, he leaned in. He reportedly went on Instagram Live and pushed back at Raesha's family, accusing them of spreading rumors about him, framing himself as the one being wronged. He posted clips of himself out driving, on the road, seemingly unbothered, while detectives were trying to find him. The family described one detail that captures the cruelty of it better than anything else. A relative posted online that he was wanted, that they were going to make sure he was found. And according to the family, instead of ignoring it, he reacted to it. He acknowledged it. He treated the search for him like content. There's a particular kind of horror in watching someone perform innocence while the people he hurt are still picking up the pieces. It tells you something about how he saw the women in his life and how he saw the consequences of what happened to them. To him, in those days, it seems the story was still about attention, still about going viral, still about him. But the attention he was chasing turned into the thing that closed in on him. The flood of public outrage, the family's cooperation with detectives, the sheer visibility of his own behavior, all of it kept the pressure on. For roughly 6 days, he stayed out of custody, moving, posting, performing his version of normal, while a county searched for him and a country watched. Every clip he posted became evidence of his state of mind. Every comment demanding his arrest became another set of eyes looking for him. He had spent years trying to make the internet pay attention to him, and now it finally had, just not in the way he'd ever wanted. On the 19th of October, 2023, a little more than a week after Raesha was killed, that pressure paid off. DeKalb County Police located Justin Rene Lewis in Forest Park, Georgia, and took him into custody. He was booked into the DeKalb County Jail and charged with malice murder, a charge that, in Georgia, sits at the most serious end of the spectrum, reserved for a killing the law considers deliberate, carried out with what's called malice aforethought. It is not a charge that gets filed lightly, and it is not a charge that carries a light outcome. For the family, the arrest didn't bring anything close to peace, but it brought something, a first, fragile sense of safety. Raesha's sister, Rhonda, told reporters how the family had genuinely not felt safe with him free, and how his capture finally let them breathe, even a little. For the first time since the driveway, they could sleep. Not because the pain was gone, because the immediate threat, at last, was behind bars. And then came the grief that no arrest could touch. Raesha's brother, Ralph Heard Jr., spoke about how much he was going to miss his little sister, about the personality that had defined her, the warmth that had made her the center of everything. Her family remembered a woman who treated everyone with kindness, which made the cruelty of how she was treated in return almost impossible to reconcile. The people closest to her had known her since the 9th grade, and they kept returning to the same details, the smile, the way she made people feel, the way a room changed when she walked into it. The very ordinariness of those memories is what makes them devastating. She wasn't a headline to the people who knew her. She was the person who remembered your birthday. The family started a fundraiser to help with funeral costs and to support the children she left behind, the boys who lost their mother, including the little one who should never have had to witness any of it. And the community responded because Raesha's story struck a nerve that runs through far too many households. There was even a reward offered for information, a number attached to a tragedy, the way there always is.
Is how everybody try to bring you down when they really don't even know what's going on.
So the girl who got killed, that wasn't even your baby mama?
Nah. The one from now, like the one that they saying, it could have been a possibility, you feel me?
So that was your current girlfriend?
I ain't got no girlfriend at all. You feel me? Only thing is my wife, That's the only girl, you feel me, that ever, my wife.
So she was married to Justin for 5 years. He was really abusive to her. He fought her a lot.
How bad it hurt for them to have witness that is unexplainable. It's so hard.
Just happy that Justin is captured, because we don't want anybody else to experience this. No other family.
She was laid to rest not long after the arrest, surrounded by the people who had spent years trying to protect her. But this case has never been only about one woman, and Raesha's family knew it, because the moment Justin Lewis's name hit the news, an old wound reopened more than 1,000 miles away. In New Orleans, the family of Sidni Dalcour was watching. For 6 years, they had carried a suspicion the legal system had never validated. They had believed, from the very first day, that the man Sidni married was the man who took her life. And now here he was again, on every screen, charged in the death of another young woman who had loved him, in a manner that echoed Sidni's death with a precision that felt less like coincidence and more like a signature. 2 women, 2 relationships, defined by their families' accounts, by abuse. 2 lives ending by gunfire, one found in her car with the engine running, the other in her family's driveway with her son beside her, and one man standing at the center of both stories. Sidni's sister has spoken about her certainty, the kind of certainty that comes from knowing exactly who someone was behind closed doors. For her, Raesha's case wasn't a separate tragedy. It was confirmation of something her family had been screaming into a void for years, that the danger was real, that it had always been real, and that if anyone had truly listened back in 2017, maybe there would have been no driveway in 2023. That's the question that gives this case its weight, and it's the one nobody can answer cleanly. If the 2017 case had ended differently, if it had ended at all, would Raesha Heard still be alive? We don't get to know. The 2017 case remains, by the public record, unsolved. Justin Lewis was never charged in Sidni's death, and in the Raesha Heard case he stands accused, awaiting the slow grind of the legal process, presumed innocent in the eyes of the law until that process reaches its end. Those are the facts, and they have to sit beside the family's anguish, even when they sit uncomfortably. And that process is its own kind of endurance test for the people left behind. A malice murder case does not resolve in a news cycle. There are hearings, motions, delays, and the long wait for a trial date that can stretch across months and years every step of it, forcing the family to relive the worst day of their lives in a courtroom, in front of strangers, on a schedule they don't control. For Raesha's loved ones, the arrest was never the finish line. It was the beginning of a marathon they never asked to run, carried out in the public eye, with 2 small boys watching from the other side of it. Justice, when it's real, is rarely fast, and the families who wait for it pay a price the rest of us never see. But here is what's not in dispute, and what makes this story matter beyond the names involved. Look at the warning signs, laid out in order, and notice how loudly they spoke. A previous relationship that ended in a death the family always blamed on him. Years of documented fear in Raesha's own household. A breakup that, statistically, marks the most dangerous chapter of all. A pregnancy he reportedly wanted ended. And most damning of all, an earlier attempt, recorded in a police report, that failed only because a weapon malfunctioned. None of these were secret. None of these were ambiguous. The people closest to Raesha saw them. They named them. They were afraid of exactly the outcome that came true. And still, it happened anyway. That's the part that should sit with you. Not the shock of the crime, but the predictability of it. This was not a bolt from a clear sky. It was the last step on a staircase that had been visible the whole way down. The tragedy of Raesha Heard isn't that no one saw it coming. It's that so many people did, and the warning still wasn't enough to stop it. If there's anything to carry out of a story this heavy, it's a hard, unsentimental truth about how this kind of danger actually behaves. It rarely announces itself all at once. It builds. It hides behind charm and apologies and good days. It isolates. It escalates. And by the time it's undeniable, The person living inside it is often the one with the least power to escape it. The signs that look small in the moment, the jealousy, the control, the unease no one could quite explain, are frequently the early shape of something that grows teeth later. The people around Raesha understood the shift long before they could fully name it. That instinct, that quiet sense that something is wrong, deserves to be taken seriously, every single time. Raesha Heard was the glue that held her family together. She was a mother, a sister, a daughter, a friend who had known the same people since she was a teenager. She spent the end of her life doing the bravest thing a person in her position can do, trying to leave, trying to protect the children she loved, trying to choose her own future. She should have gotten to live it. Her family is still seeking justice in her name, and the memory of who she was, the smile, the warmth, the way she carried everyone else, is the thing they're determined won't be buried with her. Somewhere out there, 2 boys are growing up without their mother. And somewhere in New Orleans, another family still waits for an answer about a young woman named Sidni, found in her car on a spring night in 2017, whose story refused to stay quiet. If this case moved you, do something with that feeling. Learn the signs. Believe people when they tell you they're afraid. And if you or someone you know is living inside a relationship that's started to feel dangerous, know that there are people whose entire job is to help, confidentially and without judgment. In the United States, the National Domestic Violence Hotline is available anytime, day or night, at 1-800-799-7233. Reaching out is not weakness. Sometimes it's the bravest call a person ever makes. Thank you for watching and for caring enough to make it this far. If this story stayed with you, take a second to like this video and subscribe, because it genuinely helps these women's stories reach the people who need to hear them. And before you go, let me know in the comments where in the world you're watching from. It means a lot to see how far Raesha's story travels. Rest easy, Raesha. We're still telling it.